This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, hello, hello. This is Truth Be Told. This is Dr. Walter Aka.
Dr. Kyle Dumpert.
Oh, do I officially get to do my own intro
Yes.
Yes.
Come on.
now? Well, my name is Dr. Leroy Horton. Thank you.
Yeah, man. So this is our official, unofficial year in review. We wanted to kind of get together and talk about what we've seen in dentistry this year. 2022, I think, was I don't want to say it was crazier than 2020 or 2021, but I feel like 2022 is just kind of like people had gone backwards mentally, physically, everything, right? You know, vaccines had come out in 2021 and everybody basically had forgotten COVID exists to a lot of people. I'm seeing in Texas, we don't want to talk about Texas, but in Texas, no one cares about COVID anymore. It's like it never happened. You know what I mean? Even though people are getting sick, you know, people are still testing positive. They're still like, nope, I'm still fine. Nope. I'm not doing anything different.
Hey, if you don't take a test, you can never be positive.
Exactly.
This is exactly how we did not do in dental school. But yeah, so I kind of wanted to get you guys together. Just let's talk about just dentistry in general, because I think a lot of crazy things happen in dentistry, and I have some, you know, and then we can maybe do some like, you know, forecasting of what we think 2023 is going to bring us, you know. But the first thing I want to talk about is kind of like, what's your biggest surprise this year in dentistry? Like, what was the one thing that you were like, I wasn't expecting that? I can start off. I want to start off by saying that my biggest surprise was how little I learned or gained from going to my perio conference. It was completely useless. Useless. And I don't mean that in the nicest way. I mean that in a horrible manner. It was useless. I got my credits. But besides that, I don't even remember. I even said this to my wife. I'm like, I don't even know what I learned.
Wow.
Like, I just felt like they just kept repeating the same thing over and over again. And nothing really like sparked my imagination. Nothing made me go, man, this is exciting. I want to go back and try this or learn more about this or anything. So for me, the biggest surprise was how useless my perio conference was.
What about you, Leroy? You're an aspiring periodontist. Were you at the meeting?
I was. I think I've had similar feelings about a lot of the conventions that I've been to. And I think part of it is once you get to a certain experience level, there's really nothing that's going to knock your socks off at the annual conventions, because you're kind of staying abreast of all the things that are going on in the industry. Most conventions I think are really useful for people that are just graduated, have been maybe a couple years out. Yeah, but once you're at a certain experience level, like, I mean, Walter, how long you been out now?
Man, 2014. So what, 8 years?
Yeah. So I mean, at this point, I mean, what's the next revolution that could really happen?
Right.
You know, we've seen piezo technology become widely accessible,
lasers,
you know, guided, you know, so I think that the next big technological revolution looks like it's going to be the robot assisted implants. And I mean, I don't know, it hasn't really sparked my interest, but it seems to be the next big thing on the horizon, which I don't understand, because inevitably it's going to be just AI doing it, and we're not going to be doing anything. So we're creating technology to take our jobs.
That's going everywhere. Even McDonald's is doing that now. I heard that there was one in New York or New Jersey that basically doesn't have anybody there. It's like all computers. They do everything.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Ohio, right?
I'm not. I didn't see where it was, but I saw that it was going full auto, no employees.
Yeah. So, what about you guys? What was your biggest surprise for you guys this year?
Besides the guy with boxers in your living room, Kyle.
Well, that was Kyle's biggest surprise. That would have been anybody's biggest surprise to have a tweaker in your house.
You never know who's going to show up at your house. Yeah. Honestly, I thought the year went a lot better than I was expecting it to go, as far as patient flow, patients being willing to spend money on things. But I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but going into 2023 with what's going on in the world and the stock markets and everything else, what 23 might look like. But I was probably most shocked with the willingness of people to accept treatment.
Hmm. That's actually, that statement right there is very surprising to me, because I'm hearing the complete opposite from
Really?
from that. Yeah, from a lot of doctors saying that people are not willing to accept treatment because of what they hear in the media and the news about recession coming up.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Well, Kyle, do you feel like the willingness to accept is, I know you're going to get into insurance stuff later, but is this your insurance patients? Is this your cash paying patients that
Or do you
you
think it's
get that
regional?
from?
It might be regional. I still think there was still a lot of savings that people had, I think, from all the government money that was handed out.
Okay.
So I'm starting to see a slowdown of that going into 2023,
Okay.
but I saw it across the board, cash patients and insurance-based patients. I went out of network with some insurances, and I was able to maintain a lot of those patients, and they were still willing to pay out of pocket. So I don't know if that's a consequence of being more health conscious, maybe being that scarcity mindset that a lot of dental practices in my area anyway, the patients are calling saying they can't get in to see their regular dentist for 2 to 3 to 4 months, whether it's specialty or general practice. So that scarcity mindset of, you got a problem, like, let's fix it right now, same day dentistry. So I'm not sure, but that was probably my biggest surprise.
Okay.
Well, I would actually honestly love to hear more about your transition to out of network with some of these insurances, because I think that's what a lot of practices are going towards, seeing how insurances are unsustainable at the rates that they're
Right.
paying, but everyone's scared that they're going to lose all their patients. So how do you think you're able to maintain some of these patients despite the fact they'd be paying more?
There's not a lot of dentists in my area, so that's one of the biggest benefits, is
Yeah.
there's not a lot of competition. One of the offices in my area went fully out of network with all insurances, probably at the beginning of the year. So that kind of helped set the stage for the direction that I want to ultimately go. I've done it a lot of different ways, because I was signed up for a lot of insurances, but you ask your front desk or you ask your team to support this choice, and you create letters. You want to notify the patients, and like, for instance, when I went out with MetLife, created a nice letter, gave it to the front desk, said, hey, hand these out. I started 6 months in advance. Hand these out to the MetLife patients. We're going out of network on this date. This is to let them know. 6 months rolls around and we're out of network. All the MetLife patients are upset. I said, what happened to that letter? Oh, here it is on the stack at the front desk. None of the letters got handed out. So that one was a little bit rocky. I'm in the process of going out of network with Delta Dental right now. So I figured if I can make it through the biggest one, and anybody that I've talked to, either locally or reading on Facebook groups or dental groups, anybody that has dropped Delta Dental, I've not heard of one that said, I regret that decision. Every single one of them has said, best decision I ever made. So that's one of my biggest. So I'm just biting the bullet and going with it. So I'm doing a year in advance this time. So I just started handing out a letter a couple weeks ago saying, this is why my practice, this is why I need to go out of network. One, where my staff is staying on the phone for 2 to 3 hours at a time with Delta Dental, trying to get things approved that should have been paid for, and they're not, and it's not sustainable. I've invested in CAD CAM, cone beam, laser, listed all the things that I've invested in. Hand this letter to your HR director or your HR people at your company. Let them know November 2023 we're going out of network. this gives you plenty of time, or your company plenty of time, if they want to pick a different insurance. These are two that I'm going to stay in network with as of right now, and just setting that stage of not just dropping it on them 3 months. Hey, we're at a network. This is a year process. I'm giving you 6 months to let your HR company know, and then 6 months from now, I'll give the patient another letter. If you decide, if you're staying with Delta Dental, this is what it's going to look like in 6 months. You'll have to pay your bill in full when you come here. Delta Dental will send you a check, just to get all of those expectations up front. So I think being honest with the patients about why you're doing it, I figure you're going to lose anywhere from 20 to 50% of the patients. But if you look at your numbers, I could lose 60% of the patients and still come out on top because I'd be getting my full fee.
Gotcha. Well, I hope Delta Dental is listening, because this is it's a growing trend.
Yeah.
The more they cut and the more that it's odd, because they have a lot of philanthropic arm that does a lot of good work, right? And then at the University of Washington, I think they're still doing it, but for a while they were paying for all the graduating students' board exams.
Oh,
right?
wow.
And so when I
Okay.
would talk to the graduating students, all they would know of Delta Dental is they're amazing. They paid for our board exams and they really helped out. And for us, we're looking at like, okay, you're trying to indoctrinate them early so they don't, because they're going to come in with this much lower fee schedule and not know the difference, right? And think, oh, well, that's just the norm. But we've been seeing what's been happening over the last, 10 plus years. But I hope they're listening, because a lot of people are going out of network on a lot of their insurances, and Delta Dental is a big one that everyone is completely frustrated with.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Were you in network with them at all when you were
Yeah.
in private practice?
Yeah, and it hurt because our fees had been stagnant, for many years. When we did petition to raise them, they throw you a nominal, $10 raise on your crown fee or something to that effect, right?
Right.
And then they come to you and they try to put you on this incentive plan where, it all depends on what your recall success rate is. So it resets all your fees. And I want to say like your pro fee got down to like $70 or something. But the promise is that if you can maintain like an 85% recall rate with your patients, we'll reimburse you at this rate. If you can maintain a 90% recall rate, it's this rate. If you're close to 100, and they kind of give you this almost like a multi-level marketing scheme where they promise, oh, if you just work hard, you can make so much money. But no one ever has 100% recall.
Right.
No one's ever going to attain that.
Right.
But they dangle that out there. And that's why one of the reasons I'm happy I sold my practice is, A, I don't have to deal with that. But then I have to decide coming back out, what type of provider do I want to be? And if I contract with other offices, am I going to be by default under their fees, or are they going to be trying to sign me up as a provider, or do I just stay fee for service? Well, and honestly, right now, I have no desire to go back to doing extreme discount dentistry.
Right.
There's reasonable fees, right? And you can have lower fees if it fits your model. That's no problem. Not judging that. That's where we were, but it's even beyond that when it comes to their reimbursement rates.
And from what I've read, going in the opposite direction, sending out letters saying your fee schedule is now lower when we're in a time of inflation, when everything else is higher. It's just really a slap in the face because they feel like they can.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Walter, that was what, 5 minutes before we started on the insurance talk?
That was going to be one of my lists, but it's all good. Here's a question.
Okay.
What did you guys notice was the biggest like trend? So like, for example, in the early 2000s, I thought sleep apnea was big, right? Implants started coming in. People really want to do implant sleep apnea. And then I want to say like the middle of 2015 and so forth, they started talking about insurance and basically billing medical insurance for some dental procedures. So what do you guys noticing is a big trend right now in dentistry? Like, for example, for me, I've noticed a lot more doctors wanting to do their own, surgeries. They wanted to be that, one-stop shop, right? And I think the reason why they're seeing that, and also bringing in specialists into their office, but the reason why they're doing that is because that's what corporate is doing.
Okay.
So I'm starting to notice that trend, the one-stop shop dental model. If you can't beat them, join them.
I would agree. I think the biggest trend I'm seeing is either corporate offices taking over, right? Everybody's getting bought out by DSOs, or people coming together and forming these multiple group practices, essentially being, small local DSOs, more so than the solo practice. And you're right, Walt, everyone's bringing in their own specialists, once or twice a month. And I think it's hard for a lot of specialists that I see coming out to start their own office because of that, right? It's really hard to compete with, whether you have the corporate structures or the private owned group practice that all have their own traveling specialists and they're not referring to anybody. And I'm not sure what the answer to that is, because honestly, I do feel like the DSOs are taking over and they're opening a practice in every single corner. And so, yeah.
So, okay, well, let me ask you guys this then. Do you think that this model is sustainable and is it beneficial for dentistry? I mean, have basically specialists not having their own office and traveling.
Well, this is something Walter and I we're working on. And again, I hate to bring up insurance again, but we ran into a problem with insurance, trying to get Walter credentialed at my office through insurance and requesting fee schedules prior to signing paperwork. And the fee schedules that Walter and I were presented from multiple companies were less as a specialist that I'm currently getting as a general dentist.
Yep.
Really?
That should have been my surprise. That was it.
Should have been your surprise.
I was like, what the hell? I even said that can't be right, Kyle.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I contacted the insurance companies asking them, why are you giving me a fee schedule for a specialist that's less than what I'm getting as a general dentist at my office?
Right.
And they never responded to me. And
not.
yeah, that decision is like, why would we sign up for that? Yeah.
How
So,
much
yeah,
of that,
go ahead.
how much of that do you think is, because insurance companies are exempt from monopoly laws, right? So you could have, Blue Cross Blue Shield having 80% of the market share in any given region, and there's nothing illegal about that. And so there really is no competition.
Right.
And when you look at this, not to hammer on Delta Dental, but like I said, I hope they're listening. They have a huge percentage of the market share, right?
Yep.
And if they're not directly insuring patients, they're administering other insurances. And if you see what happens with a lot of corporations is, let's say they have something like MetLife, right? Just throw one out because you mentioned that earlier. Or let's say they have I'll take that. Let's say they have a privately funded benefits package. Well, what they'll have is Delta Dental will come in and administer the insurance benefits. But what you see is the initial insurance plan, which may have been good, now all the new employees get defaulted to Delta Dental. And that's something we ran into with a lot of the labor unions that we contract with. The labor unions themselves, you would have a pretty good benefits package that paid 100% of almost all treatment, right? And for years, that's what our business model was based off of. And we ate pretty good those years, right? Delta Dental started administering and saying that, telling the unions that they could cut costs for them. Well, all of a sudden, what we noticed is that all the new hires were defaulted to Delta Dental, which they would have copays, and then would have to wait till open enrollment the next November, and they would have to actively switch to their original union plan. And so we would have to spend countless hours at the end of every year, every time a union patient would come in, explain to them, this is what you have as an option. This is what you have to sign this paperwork. You have to send it in. And so, yeah, I mean, what was the original point we were talking about? I kind of lost my train of thought.
No,
I thought-
we were basically talking about how like it's gotten crazy with a lot of
Yes.
specialists are starting to work in GP offices.
Right. Right.
And then we're noticing that insurance has kind of gotten hip to the game basically and saying, okay, well, we're gonna basically prevent that from happening, right? By either providing you with less, as in, like for me and Kyle, when we did it, I basically got paid less than he did.
That's right.
Right.
At his own
That's what I'm
office.
saying. The
Yeah.
monopoly.
Yeah.
They do it because they know you can't go anywhere else. And
Right.
you're ultimately going to be left with a huge swath of the population that's either having to decide, do I pay for this implant completely out of pocket,
Right.
or do I shop around and find someone that takes Delta Dental?
And what I
so it's
actually
hard to
did,
compete.
what I actually did is I had a friend who's a periodontist that was maybe you know this guy Kyle Tony.
Yep, yep.
And basically I had a conversation with him. He's like, yeah, that's why I don't accept any insurance. So he really barely he might accept one or two,
Right.
and then that's it. And he's like,
Right.
yeah, it's ridiculous because they know that everybody's going to take it. So why would I accept it? So like that's what a lot of people are doing around. So who's getting hurt? Patients. They're going to have to pay
Patients.
more or go out further to look for somebody, maybe 2 hours away.
Right. Right.
I mean, I don't know.
And-
I think the whole thing is just crazy, but dentistry is getting to the point where we're not controlling anything, guys.
Yeah, it's true. I think part of it falls on human resources and the insurance companies that make it sound like this is a fantastic plan. You get coverage, we're going to cover all this stuff, and the patients come in expecting it to act like medical insurance and have very minimal out-of-pocket expense until they find out. And we have to educate them and say, no, this isn't like medical, and that expectation of the patient having no personal responsibility for what plan they signed up for, or even letting you know if their plan changed when they come in, and waiting till the end of the appointment and say, oh, by the way, I changed the insurance plan. And it's like,
Right.
at least help me out a little bit. Like, at least when you walk in the door, say, hey, my plan changed, and don't get upset if things aren't covered with what they used to be.
But Kyle, how do you feel medical gets away with it? Because I feel like when you go to your doctor, there is some picking and choosing for, who's your provider, right? Did you choose Kaiser?
Right.
Did you choose whatever? But you usually show up, you may or may not have a $20 copay. You just
Right.
do what they ask you to do, and then you get a bill for a couple $100. And
Right.
no one really seems to be whining and complaining when it happens in that arena. But when we have to ask for a 50% copay on a crown or an implant, like, people lose their shit over that.
They do.
And
Yeah.
I really want to know how medicine has been able to just make it the expected norm that, hey, you're going to get a surprise bill after a few months for a couple $100 or a couple $1,000, and that just is what it is.
Medical is very good at educating patients. Or how do I put this? Medical is
disagree.
very good. No, hear me out. How many times have you gone to the doctor and then at the end of the day you get this bill for things that you didn't even know they did, right?
Yeah.
And like Leroy said, he's like, hey, you call them, you might call them and bitch, right? You might call them and be like, what is this? And they'll be like, oh yeah, it's because this, and this, your insurance, and then you go, okay. But
See,
in dentistry, we're basically teaching patients that we're the last option, not a preventative measure. And my brothers even mentioned, they were like, wait a minute, I'm supposed to do everything by myself. You guys just make sure that it doesn't get bad. So if I have a problem, I come to you. Medicine, we're doing all these tests so that you don't have a problem. Does that make sense?
I look at medicine as they
Not
have
how you look at it. I'm
created-
talking about
Well-
how insurance, how patients, normal, you know what I mean? Think about it. How we look at dental is not how, patients look
Well,
at dental.
There's a big difference between calling your local dental office that is owner operated,
Okay.
one girl running the show, and it's the same people that you see every 6 months.
Right.
They're there, they're the ones you talk to, versus calling a hospital or medical insurance, where you're never going to hit the same person twice. You get passed around between 2 or 3 or 4 different people before you can even talk to somebody that can answer your question. And they have so much layer of complexity there that you're just, I think, get frustrated to the point where, like, at this point, I'll just pay it because I don't know what else to do.
So then why don't we just do that?
It's a lot harder.
Why don't we just
It's a
make it
lot
as
harder when
complicated
you're-
as possible?
It's a lot harder when a patient comes in and they know you're the owner, and it's like, well, I'm talking directly to the owner right now, so
Mm.
that's why they don't have any problem coming in and say, you're charging what for that? Can't we get this any cheaper? Because they're talking directly to the person that makes that decision, versus a hospital. It's like, I'm just an employee here. I'm just doing my
Okay.
job.
So answer this for me then. I go to I'll call it private practice, right?
Mhm.
And I never talk prices with that doctor, because they
Okay.
come in, they look at everything that the nurse or whoever charted for them, right? And then they say, okay, well, we need to do better with this, and this. Do you have any questions? How are you feeling? Da, 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 and then I leave, right?
Mhm.
With us, I feel like we do this whole interaction of let's talk prices with people when we don't need to. I'll speak for myself. I don't talk prices with anybody.
Okay.
Oh, how much is that going to cost after I do my consultation? How much is that going to cost? Man, you're talking to the wrong person. That's the first thing I say. You're talking to the wrong person. I don't know any. You know what I do? I basically make sure that I'm not biased by my decision. That's why I don't know prices.
Okay.
And I say that to them. So now they can't talk to me about it.
Okay.
Own your own practice or not, I'm keeping myself out. It's like you basically just put a whole layer of not me. You may know the information, but the patient doesn't need to know that you know that information. Right?
Okay.
And then you have that, oh, Susie up front. That's who you talk to. Here's the, insurance coordinator, whatever you want to, whatever special title we like to give people nowadays, right? We give them that title and they only talk to that person. They don't talk to
Okay.
you. Why can't I get this, and this? Well, let me talk to your insurance. Or here's the number to your insurance. Talk to your insurance about this, and this. Why don't we guide people versus trying to answer everybody's question? We don't always have to be a one-stop shop when it comes to knowing everything. But dentists, we try to do this. Dentistry, I think, has gotten to the point where we try to basically feel like we need to answer everybody's question. We need to do everything. We don't have to. Medicine, I mean, I barely talk to anybody anymore when I call. Let me have an issue with like something I bought and then call that company. Press 1 if you want to do this. Press 2 if you want to. I never talk to a person. Right? I try to get a credit. I try to get my credit card was expired, so I try to get a new one. Press 1 for this, press 2 for this, enter this. Okay, cool. We sent you the stuff. Never once did I talk to a single person.
Let me. I think you can get away with that because you're the specialist. But let me get.
I don't believe that, though, Kyle. I don't
As a-
believe that. I
as a
don't.
general
I don't.
dentist
Honestly,
that is
I don't believe
interested in
that.
customer service.
No.
Yeah.
It's not lack of customer service. It's basically it's lack of. It's kind of like you never want to tell your patients where you live, right? You
Okay.
have to separate your personal from your business, right? So when you're at work, you don't have to be the front office, the back office, and everything else. You don't have to do that. You are the clinician. Yes, you own the business, and the business person. You don't ever. If I have an issue with Walmart, I don't call the CEO.
Right.
Why do we have to call the dentist who owns the office? Why can't I talk to the person whose job it is to do insurance?
You can do that. I mean,
You can call
So-
the CEO of Walmart.
no. I'm saying
I was like,
you can set it
let
up.
me get that number.
Well, I tell you what I did is I always had a firewall between me and the patients. So
Okay.
me and my associate doctors, we focus purely on clinical. You
Right.
go in, you do your exam. This is what you need. This is why, or this is what your options are. Oh, how? Well, doc, that sounds expensive. Well, I don't do the numbers. I just do the clinical stuff. I'll have my, coordinator come in and give you all the rundown on the numbers.
Right.
I always try to make it seem like I had nothing to do with prices.
That's it.
Right.
But Kyle,
and-
why can't you do that then?
Maybe it's the control side of me.
There it is.
That could be.
This was the breaking moment. I wanted him to say that. The type A dentist who thinks they need to do everything. That's really what it comes down to.
No, and I agree. I agree with you that at 90% of the time, I'll tell the patient when they ask how much. I say, Jackie, up front, we'll go over, look at your insurance, go over everything with you. There are times when when everybody at the front desk is busy and I'm just looking to get started. I say roundabout figures. Typical price is around $3,000. With your insurance, we take a discount. You have a copay. It's going to be roughly $250.
See, Kyle,
And they're like,
right there,
okay,
mistake.
let's do it.
Mistake. You should have just been like, I'm gonna go, shop online for another, shooting gun or some kind of, go get coffee. That's what you got to do, Kyle. You pay others to do this for you.
And that's what corporate, when I worked at Heartland, that's what they wanted. They didn't want the dentist to talk numbers at all.
Right. Okay.
They wanted you to focus on clinical and leave all of that for the the insurance coordinator.
Yeah, the people you pay to do this.
To handle it. Right. Yeah. No, it's right. But I'm not afraid to admit it's a little bit of a problem that I have.
Well, I tell you this much. The
I want you to enjoy life, Kyle. I want you to enjoy life.
Well, one of the big reasons I created that separation early on was that patients love, especially when they've been seeing you for years and there's a rapport, they love to use that, and understandably, so I'm not judging patients, to barter or haggle, not barter, haggle. And then especially associate doctors who are not as tied to the numbers necessarily as an own-in doctor are, they were much more likely to give discounts or throw things in for free because there's a sentimental, connection that you have with the patient, and they might be in pain and they might give you a sob story.
Yes.
And we're human, so we fall. I said, you know what? I do want to help people, but I got to keep the lights on. So there's got to be a firewall, and I'm going to have Leah or whoever is my, rock solid, manager or coordinator go over that, because I know that they know they don't have the authority to give discounts. So that's not even part of the conversation.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. I don't know. I just think, this year we should all make it, and I'm talking about every dentist, we should make it a pact to just keep it professional, keep it non-personal, because I can never go to, and I keep using Walmart because I go to Walmart. I went to Walmart today, so it's on my mind. But we can use a very more expensive place. But Walmart works for me. I can never go to Walmart and say I'm going to go ahead and barter or bargain or negotiate by telling a sad story about anything. The price is the price.
Yeah.
To this day, I still don't understand why dentists have gotten to the point where we literally are racing to the bottom when it comes to what discounts we give. It's like we talk about how much we hate working really hard for the same thing that we used to do last year, the year before, right? We had to see double the patient, we blame insurance and so forth. But I think a lot has to do with what we're doing as well. You're right. Yeah. Like, I feel like if something costs, let's just say a crown costs $1,000, why would you then say, okay, well, Mrs. Smith, because she told me a sad story, gets it for $800. Mr. Smith, who didn't tell me a sad story, pays $1,000. Now who's being hypocritical in a way?
Yeah.
Right? But this is what we do every single day. Yeah. And we justify with our own means or method or excuse.
Yeah.
So maybe this. Everybody wants you to raise your right hand and tell me that. I promise I will not give freebies away.
well, let me ask the two of you a question, because I saw an evolution in my own ideology when I first graduated, and I was very idealistic. And I say, I just want to help people. I'm young, I got energy, I can grind. So yeah, if we're doing $600 crowns, $700 crowns, no problem. I can bang these out, breaking sweats, neck sore. And I would see older doctors at, CE courses or whatever that would say, no, you need to respect your profession and your skill set. And in my head at the time, because I was so naive, I was like, oh, they're just all about the money, right? But then now I'm on that other end where I'm like, listen, like, there's liability involved, there's costs, there's overhead, and you want to be able to make sure that you're respecting yourself by, and I'm not saying charge the most possible you could squeeze out of patients, but there has to be a reasonable reimbursement for the amount of years you put in, the work you put in, and the amount of liability that you're taking and responsibility for these patients over the years. Did you guys see an evolution in how you saw that particular topic from the moment you graduated to now, as experienced as you are?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'll say absolutely. You know,
Yeah.
I've learned to basically stick to the numbers are the numbers. I've learned to basically appreciate that in the end, I don't want to screw anybody over. There have been times where, you know, we didn't get the results, like let's just say an implant failed. Patient's frustrated, they don't want to do it again. Here, take your money back.
Right.
I didn't consider the cost that it took me to do the first time, the overhead, the material. I just said, just take your money back. Because to me, it's not worth the patients being pissed off, writing bad reviews. You see what I'm saying? So there are, I mean, just throughout the year, you'll write off something, or you'll write off multiple somethings, right? Your own fault or not your own fault, something will happen. And I honestly think that's also that's something that we don't consider, right? It's kind of like if you go to retail, there's a certain percentage of theft that's been written off already, right? They look at their numbers and they know that this is going to be written off. So we have to also start thinking that way as well. You know, and I said, the more I do, the more I realize that, one, these numbers aren't outrageous, because I went to go get a new iPhone. I still have the 7, going to keep it forever. I do. I refuse to change, right? But I went to go get the new phone, the 14. And there's two things that happened. And this is when I really started thinking about this year. One, the 14 Pro, whatever, is on back order. Ready? So I'm basically, it's on back order for the more expensive product. I think it's $1,200, right?
Okay.
And then you can buy the 14 small, large, I forgot what it's called, right? And that's like $1,099. So it's still
Okay.
$1,000.
Yeah.
And I saw people literally buying this like it was candy.
Yeah.
And this phone, within 2-3 years, what do you guys think, will probably be replaced?
Yeah.
You pay $1,000 for a crown that you hope will get you 10, 20, 30 years for the same price. And you're bugging me about how expensive it is.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? Like, it's not bitterness. It's just you go
Yeah.
out into the real world, and this is what maybe every associate should do. Just go stand at an Apple store and see how expensive stuff really is and how much of a turnover these products are. Right? People will
Yeah.
lose their earbuds, which is $500 or $300 or whatever it may be. People will, break their tablets, will do all this stuff, and they'll come back and buy another one. But then they'll complain because they had to pay $1,000 to keep a tooth, which would then help you eat better, which would then keep you alive.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
anybody that says, unless you're a teenager, that this is going to keep you alive. You see what I'm saying? So that's when I realized that all this stuff about price and everything means nothing to. You can complain, you can tell me the saddest story in the world. I promise you I will not change my price. And it sounds cold-hearted, but it's not. It's basically, let's put everything in perspective. If I see you with an iPhone 4 and I have a 7, you know what I mean? You really need to put everything in perspective, and you need to be honest with yourself as a patient and say what's important to you.
No, I agree with Walter. I used to fall for that sad story of people complaining the money blues, and people will find the money and spend money on things that they value. And if they don't value their teeth or their mouth or their health enough to spend money on it, why do I feel that I need to sacrifice on my end for something they're not willing to sacrifice for? So yeah, I agree with Walter that I try not to give those discounts, and when I do, it's because I want to. It's because I have a relationship with that patient being in the small town, whether they were my teacher before or something.
Right.
Yeah, I'll throw some discounts out there because there's a history there, not because I feel sorry for you, but because I want to.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, because that's a great question, and it might go back to the trends question, right? Talking about value in the marketplace. Okay.
Mhm.
I saw this trend that some of the most famous providers are all social media providers, right? And you see them get a lot of lecture circuit engagements. When you go to their social media, they're not known for their before and afters. They're not known for their cases. They're known for their dances. Right?
That's what I've been doing wrong.
Right? So, I mean, tell me I'm lying.
Breaking it down. I'm gonna start breaking it down.
If you go to Instagram, all you see is dentists that are famous in their communities simply for the skits and the dances that they do on their social media.
Yeah.
And you're hard pressed to find actual case presentation.
Well, then, so, okay, well, that's actually a good question. Okay, so you know how like we complain about, or I'll rephrase, I complain about society now getting dumber. I say this every day. I swear I have a conversation because I look at some like my assistants will show me something on TikTok and I'm like, I don't understand why this is funny to you guys. Like back in the day, Eddie Murphy was funny. Like he'll say some stuff on Delirious. He'll probably be canceled if if Delirious was right now, completely canceled, right? But back then, I mean, I remember in college, I was crying, like hilarious, right? Now, some of the stuff people do, I'm just like, I don't understand why that's funny. Yeah. Or the dances that people do aren't even dances. Like you had to break it down back in the day. Like you had to put it down for people to respect you. Now you do this and all of a sudden you got moves and everybody's copying that. Yeah, they're just basically moving around. And I'm like, what is this? But maybe we're wrong, guys. Maybe we should start dancing. But I don't understand how this is beneficial for anything. I don't understand how this is educating patients to know what's better. They'll come to you and you can probably charge a lot. I mean, because I know, like you said, I know a lot of dentists that are famous online, the patients will go to, and they'll talk about, oh, I have this celebrity come to me and they'll show you the case. And it's like horrible. No, no disrespect. Like I'm not, they say, people say, oh, you're throwing shade. I'm not throwing shade or anything. I mean, literally one case, and this is a guy around here. And I was this
frozen.
Close say what?
Yeah, I think he is.
Yeah.
Oh, can you hear me?
Okay, you're back now.
You're back.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. No. So basically, this guy, he shows his case, right? And the patient was like edge to edge, almost class 3, right? Like literally almost class 3. And so then he says, "Oh man, we're gonna do this right." And I said, "Okay, let me see how he does this." He didn't fix anything with.
There we go.
Yeah, I'm sorry, he didn't fix anything with like ortho or anything. He just gave him veneers.
Okay.
And that was it. And he showed the case, the before and after. He did actually show before and after. And it was like, I mean, I'm talking about the veneers were probably like this white. Okay.
We're gonna have to cut Walt off.
Yeah, Walter, we're losing you.
Oh man.
Yeah, you got to pay your cable bill, man.
my internet bill. Let me see here.
How the public views a successful or competent dentist, right? And that may not be a completely new phenomenon because we've always, for instance, in my lifetime, anyone that was rich, there was an assumed competence. Right. They may be, I mean, look at now, Elon Musk, right? Yeah, he might be a brilliant mind in one arena. He's the richest person in the world, but he and others assume that just because he's successful on this track, that translates across, other
Multiple
types
gambits.
of ventures, right? And so I feel like patients are seeing that like, oh, this person's got 80,000 followers. It must mean that they're good at dentistry. Right. But dentistry is not what got them 80,000 followers. It was the dancing and the, and I'm not sure that that's a positive thing for our profession. Not that I think social media is great to get your message out there, but I think this is an unintended consequence of, how we miseducate the public as far as what a good clinician is and what competent work is.
Well, so
no, I agree with you. that's a valid point, because we put so much, or the general population puts so much value in what they see online, that there is no, I mean, I hate to use fact checking, but if it's online, it's gospel. And that's how a lot of that information gets misconstrued, not just with dentistry, but the news also. It's we believe what we see without any kind of investigation. And for somebody, if you're a patient that's looking to go to somebody for treatment, you should be asking for these before and afters. How many times have you done this procedure? How, if I'm going to go to a heart surgeon and get heart surgery, I want to know they're competent in that, not because they can dance good on TikTok.
Okay, well then here's a question for you guys.
Okay.
Do you guys think that we should, so I see online a lot, like on YouTube, people that are kind of now calling out these, they call them scammers. Like, oh, this person is not a financial advisor, he's a scammer. He's telling you how to basically like break the law.
Right.
Do you think that there needs to be somebody to kind of check these dentists when it comes to cases and stuff like that? Or is that going to be looked at negatively in the dental field as, oh, somebody's basically trying to mess up another dentist, right? It's kind of like, how we have that unspoken rule, you never talk bad about a dentist to a patient, which I
Right.
truly believe. You don't want to talk bad because you weren't there.
Right.
So should we also hold the same rule and say we don't want to talk bad about a dentist's social media, website or what they're doing on social media? Right? Because this is our new reality now.
Do you guys get on LinkedIn much?
I don't actually. I apparently I have a LinkedIn account. Apparently, I say that because someone told me that recently. I was like, I do?
Really?
Yeah, they're like, yeah, it says that you're a graduate at Pitt. I was like, oh,
right. Hey,
I haven't been on there since I think I was a resident. So yeah.
Right. Well, what you'll see on LinkedIn is there is a lot more critical discourse when people do post cases. You don't see a lot of dancing on LinkedIn. It's a lot more professionals presenting cases to other professionals, not really for patients to see. And so you see a lot more, critiquing and question answer asking and so forth. But I feel like if you were to make those same comments on a TikTok or Instagram, you're just automatically going to come off as a hater.
That's it.
Right.
So then what do we do?
Unfortunately, patients don't look at LinkedIn because that's more of a professional platform. So yeah, I don't know what the answer is to that one.
I think it's one of those free market issues where the dentists that don't perform, it's eventually going to catch up to them. If they're doing crappy, shoddy work, it'll eventually catch up to them, or the patient will unfortunately go through some bad treatment until they're able to find a good dentist. And whether it's word of mouth, or if that dentist is able to keep practicing, eventually word will have to get out unless they have a good public relations person that is able to bury it. But
Kyle, I don't know if I agree, buddy.
I don't know how you can police people on social media like that, because that's a big undertaking.
Right. No, the reason I say I don't know if I agree, Kyle, is because I know a lot of bad dentists. I've seen a lot, right? One thing that I'm noticing more and more, and please tell me if you guys are seeing the same thing, is whenever somebody will get a crown, and then a year later that crown is broken off, and I'm taking that tooth out to place an implant. Okay. And I'm seeing that more and more. Like, crowns are not lasting as long. Root canals are not lasting as long, right? So they're coming to me because they had endo and now there's a reinfection, or they had a crown and now the crown basically broke off at the gingival margin.
Right.
You see? And so then the question is, well, why would you go back to that dentist? Like this, to us, that's bad dentistry, because maybe this crown shouldn't have been put on this tooth, or whatever it may be, right? Open margin, whatever it might have been that caused this, recurrent decay or whatever it may be. But patients like people. They don't like dentistry. They like people. So if that guy or girl is really bad, but they have this amazing ability to connect with people, people will excuse the bad dentistry. And they'll
That's
continue
true.
to do that for a very long time. Because there's
But
always an excuse. Oh, did you bite on an apple? Oh, why, yes, I did. Come on now.
now,
You see what I'm
now,
saying? And they will talk themselves out of these situations every time.
but like you said before, we don't badmouth other dentists because we don't know the situation. And what I've learned is patients aren't the best historian. So
Right.
it could have been a great dentist that said, look, this tooth needs a crown,
Yeah.
but you also need to focus on restoring all the missing teeth because this is the only posterior tooth you have back there.
Yeah.
It's going to take a beating. No matter what we do to it, it's eventually going to break off. And they're, well, yeah, okay, I'll get this, I'll get all this stuff done. We'll get this crown taken care of. And then the patient disappears
Right.
for 5 years. They come to you and say, this crown broke off. The dentist, this is the first thing he did on me and it broke off. I don't want to go back.
Oh, and I
Very
agree,
true.
Kyle. I completely agree with you. Like, trust me, I'm probably the last person that believes patients. I mean,
I'm just playing devil's advocate.
no,
I'm playing
absolutely. I think the one thing is though, whenever you see the same, referrals,
right,
and the same things happening over and over again, sooner or later you got to say, okay,
right,
it can't be just the patient. And that's what I'm
Right.
getting at. It's like sometimes you see a trend, right? You see
Right.
cases that you see people doing stuff. You're like, Like you'll see an orthodontist, for example. Let's just say you have an orthodontist, and every patient you get after that, all their teeth are mobile, or you have resorbed roots, and you're like, okay. Sooner or later, you can't say it's the patient's fault. Like they're doing something wrong. Even
Right.
if they're too aggressive, they're rushing in cases, they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing, right? And that goes
Right.
for periodontists, that goes for endodontists. After a while, if we start seeing the same situation, you go, okay, I may not want to refer to this person, I may not want to deal with this person. But
Right.
patients don't know that, right?
Right.
They don't see the cumulative effect. They just see my case, or I see, oh, this case, and that's it. They don't look at the full picture and go, this is a pattern here, right? Like if you look at the stock market this year, you'd be like, man, why would anybody ever go in the stock market? But if you look at it 20 years out, 30 years, you'll see, okay, there is an upward trend. So you start
Right.
to see a trend. You start to
Right.
see a pattern, and patients don't see that. They just know that they like this doctor or not, good or bad.
Yeah.
And it's like, how
Right.
do we educate patients without coming off like haters?
I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can. I think that's ultimately the patient's responsibility to pick and choose who they want to be treated by and what their expectations are. And if they encourage everybody to get a second opinion, that I think that's been hammered in medicine, that
Yes.
always get a second opinion. Patients should do the same thing in dentistry. Don't rely on one person. Don't be afraid to go get a second opinion if there's something you feel isn't right.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know, guys.
especially because it's subjective, right?
Yes.
Subjective and situational. For instance, if you work in a community clinic setting, you're probably doing a lot of huge amalgam crowns and composite crowns, right? Where every surface has decay. But if you were in a private practice setting, your first thought would be, well, this needs a crown, right? And then someone might be judging that, if you got a 6 surface composite when there's only 10% of this tooth left in a private setting, if that breaks, someone's gonna be like, well, why didn't they put a crown on it, right? So I think it's hard to be judgmental of other people's work. There are some things that are egregious, right? Someone does an implant and it's into the neighboring root, because there's some things that are black and white. But I think so much of it is subjective, and you might not see or feel the effects of it till years down the road. And so it's really hard for the free market to really work when you have all these delayed indicators of bad work if someone is truly a bad dentist.
Well, okay. Well, so you just brought up something that I just thought about too. With corporates happening, and the average dentist or associate stays for what, a year, 6 months, a year. So what do we call that? Geographic success.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me talk about that.
It's definitely a thing. If you never I mean, we should all be pushing ourselves to learn and become better dentists. And one of the best ways to learn is through our mistakes. And unfortunately, when it comes to healthcare, there are mistakes, but every mistake is something to learn from. But if you're moving around year to year and you're not seeing your mistakes, figuring out what went wrong with this and what to do better next time, then you're not going to be able to grow as a dentist, unless you're looking at other people's mistakes and fixing those, but you're not doing that self-reflection on what you're doing wrong.
What if we put a financial incentive to that? For instance, whenever you sell an office, it's customary that you'll allot a certain amount of money for redos or remakes for, say, the first 12 months, or anything that was done within the last 12 months.
Right.
If the new owning dentist feels that it needs to be done because of either substandard treatment or defective materials, then the selling dentist is liable for that, right?
How do you come up with that number?
Usually there's like a industry standard, so you might allot $20,000 or $30,000 up to, or have a time period. Like, all right, for the first 12 months, anything that was done within this time period that needs to be redone, we'll pay for it, right? But I have not seen that in associate doctor contracts that say if anything needs to be redone or fails within a year after you leave, you have to reimburse us X amount of money for that. And I'm surprised that hasn't worked its way into it, especially with the amount of doctors that bounce around or have this geographic success. Because I know as an owning doctor, there was a number of times where I would just have to go in after an associate left when a crown that was either poorly delivered or a root canal that clearly was not done to standard had to be redone or sent off. Like, I would eat that cost or that time, and I would get frustrated because sometimes you don't know what someone is doing until after they leave.
You guys have heard of escrow, right? Basically, where you put a certain amount of money, and then at the end of the year, that money goes towards like your taxes for the property and so forth. I wonder if we couldn't do the same thing for associates, where they put in a certain amount of money on the side, right? And then after they leave, if a year we don't use all this money because of repairs or replacements or whatever it may be, you get that check back. You get that money back. I mean, think about that. I mean, I know it's silly, but like that would solve a lot of owners, angst about like associates, right? And associates might actually take their time and do a proper job, because if let's just say every paycheck you get $100 that gets put aside, and it's yours, right? But you can't touch it, until after. So if you leave in a year, you have a whole year to wait before you can get that money out of escrow.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that would kind of solve everybody's problem.
It sounds reasonable to me, but obviously,
right? We're not associates, but it makes sense, right? Like, imagine if like every paycheck they put in a certain amount. I don't know how much it would be, but you put that in a bank account or whatever, and then you basically, hey, after a year, thank you. You know what? No one leaves with anger, because the owner doctor knows that they're covered still, and the associate doctor knows that they'll get a check at the end. Hey, if I did good work, here's all your money back. No discussions.
Yeah. And that's not completely outside of the box, because if you look at some contracts, especially corporate contracts for associates, they'll have a clause in there that if you don't give X amount of notice before you leave, you're liable for paying for your replacement for that period of time.
Oh, wow.
Right. So I've seen that in many contracts. So that type of idea of having someone on the hook for a responsibility they have, whether it's to be at work or
they made the money already, right? They got paid for that crown. They just said that crown was crappy or something happened with that crown. Right. And it has to be documented. You did the owner doctor, you can't just be like, oh yeah, I replaced it because I didn't like the color. That's unreasonable.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I think there needs to be like a little middle ground that says, hey, this was not a good work, or something dramatic did happen.
Right.
I think that probably hasn't trickled into corporate, because I would bet a lot.
Dentistry in general. It hasn't trickled into dentistry.
But for private dentists, private owners to set something like that up, I think if an associate was coming in to look at a position and they saw that kind of written in their contract when they've never seen that in any other contract, that's probably going to be a red flag for some, where if it becomes standard in corporate, then it's easier for a private practice to incorporate that. But I think the problem with incorporating that into corporate, I'm curious what % of dentists in corporate are just making that base salary, that it doesn't matter if they're doing, what work they're doing, they're getting paid that base salary. And it's just kind of a write-off at that point where, they're really not getting paid per procedure because they're not producing that much.
Right. Yeah, that could happen. That could happen. But I just thought about that while.
But it's an interesting idea.
Well, do you guys want to do predictions for 2023, and then we'll get out of here?
Okay.
Yeah.
So who wants to start prediction for 2020?
Well, like I predict that sometime, I'm thinking maybe 2023, but it might take a little longer. We're going to see the consequence of the corporate dentistry taking over and the leverage that they have with the insurance companies, right? Because now we have opposing interests. If Heartland or whoever that might have 800 offices is now leveraging all those offices to demand certain fees from an insurance company, that might be a power play that could be good for dentistry. But again, if it's only good for the corporate offices, how good will it be for your private office? But I feel like there's going to be an interesting power play in the industry as a whole. Because if I'm Joe Schmo and I got 1 or 2 offices, it's hard for me to go to Delta Dental and say, hey, listen, I need a raise, otherwise I'm leaving. Because they're going to be like, all right, peace out, right? But if I'm Heartland and I've got hundreds of offices and I say, listen, if you don't give us X, Y, and Z, we're out. And because we have such a huge market share, like your patients are going to be hurting. And, we have all the money and resources to do the marketing and put the word out that this was because of your inability to come to the table. So I feel like there's going to be a big clash between these two giants in the industry of the corporate dental organizations and the insurance companies.
Okay.
That's my prediction.
Mine would probably be, and I was kind of expecting this to happen during the COVID shutdown with how leveraged the big corporate dental groups are and not being able to produce dentistry for a number of months. I know there's a lot of private equity money going into dentistry and
the
buying
government
up
bailed a lot of them out too, don't forget.
Right.
The PPP money was very beneficial for them.
So if the economy is going to continue to track in that recession pathway, I would see at some point there's a correction in those offices where being highly leveraged and they're not profitable anymore, they're either going to start to be unloaded because they can't keep a competent doctor in office. So my prediction is starting to see this private equity money stop flowing into dentistry when it's not really profitable for them anymore. Or I don't know, I see that model hitting a finish line at some point.
I don't know, Kyle. The reason why I say I don't know is because the failure rate for dentist dental offices is so low. And all we have to do is basically pay people less and they produce as much for us as we want, right? Because in corporate, I'm starting to notice that the minimum of 500, let's just say that you get paid 500 a day or whatever it may be, is more and more is decreasing, or you get a percentage. That percentage in Texas is easily 25%. Up in Pennsylvania, how much would you pay an associate percentage wise.
30-35%.
Exactly. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We have a lot
Yeah.
more corporates in the Texas area. So as they grow, I honestly think that model, which was what you said, right? Once corporate does something, it almost becomes norm. So I honestly
Right.
think that percentage is going to continue to decrease. Why? Which is then going to open up their what? Their profitability and their margin is going to get
Right.
wider and wider, because it's not like they can't reduce their overhead. They can easily by buying cheaper, bulkier situations, right? Heartland and so forth, right? But
Right.
if you're paying your people less, you've increased your margins big time. So I don't
At
know
the
how that
time when
well
I
is going to
worked with
dry.
them- At the
Yeah.
time when I worked with them, 50% of the offices were profitable, 50% weren't. So
Right.
the top 50 were subsidizing the lower 50. At some point, you got to trim that fat off and say, get rid of the ones that aren't performing.
Okay.
So
But by
whether
that
that
time, they've
opens up-
shut down. They've shut down the private practices. So now
Right.
they basically are the only ones in that area. So
Yeah.
if they've grown big to eliminate, but guess what? They've just eliminated their competition. So now they're the only ones. So what does it matter after that?
yeah,
Right? It's kind of like
yeah.
Walmart comes into your town. You know, mom and pop shops are gone.
right.
Then it's still
Yeah.
Walmart. Even if that Walmart is not productive or profitable, who cares? They're still there.
Well, it has
And I
to be
think that's
profitable.
what's happening. So, well, you know what I mean. I
Yeah.
think that's what's happening. It's like they're just growing so fast to eliminate everybody else, so that then they can just say, "Let's control for everything else." It's a monopoly.
Yeah.
Well, Kyle might have a point though, because at the end goal for private equity money is to eventually sell,
Broke. Yeah.
Right.
right? And I'm not sure, because let's look at the Heartland model. They try to get dentists to buy in,
Mhm.
right? They buy your office, then they come to you and say, hey, you should take $250,000 of that money and buy shares into Heartland Dental. And you're like,
Which
oh,
is
okay,
private. Which is private, so they can make up the number anytime they want.
right.
Yeah.
And then let's say a couple years later, you're like, okay, well, the shares are up. Let me sell. Well, you have to wait until the next convention that Heartland has, and there has to be a person that happens to be ready to buy at the
Right.
convention for you to sell your shares. So at some point, not that I want to call it a pyramid scheme, but their private equity is dependent on them to rope in new investors.
Mhm.
But at some point, like with most companies that are trying to scale this large, you're scaling this large with the intent of having some type of valuation and either going public or selling. And I don't see a lot of these companies having the wherewithal to be able to go public because of the business model. And you'll see with lending, if someone is trying to build a DSO off of conventional lending, you can only get so many practices before the bank's going to look at you and be like, no, you're leveraged.
Wait.
You got $5 million loans out there. Whether or not your practices are successful or not, that's too much leverage that you have, or you don't have enough leverage. So I'm curious if that prediction is right, if there is going to be a crash of the big DSOs, because you can only grow so much and scale so much, and then what are you going to do? You either stagnate,
Mhm.
sell, or you have to restructure, and then everyone's losing a lot of money. So
Right.
that's an interesting prediction. I'd like to see how that plays out.
Yeah. For me, 2023 is going to be very unique. I personally think that the one thing that we need to look out for is specialists buying general practices, specialists buying general dentist practices. And the reason I
Okay.
mentioned that is because when I was at the Perio conference, that was a breakaway group.
Okay.
These guys basically said, why are we even waiting for people to refer to us? Why don't we just buy GP offices, as many as we can, and then basically sit in the middle, and then everybody's funneling to us? So if an associate doesn't send patients to us, guess what? You're gone. Next person in. You're going to send everything to us. So now you're feeding the specialist. The specialist now also looks and says, as a periodontist, hey, hygiene, why aren't you doing more SRPs? Because we know that this is a number for the general public that has perio disease and so forth, right? So now you're pushing a lot of these things. And so people are, specialists are saying, okay, well, I don't want to work by going into your office. So why don't I just buy you out? And this was something that a lot of people went to kind of
Huh.
learn how to basically buy GP practices and just kind of build their own little DSO.
Wow.
So that's
interesting.
something that you're going to probably hear more and more about.
You know, when I first graduated, I worked for a doctor out here, Dr. Photo, who's an oral surgeon, but owned 5 GP/OS offices. And so I was the GP working for him, and he would just travel between all his offices, off internal referrals. There was a low number of external referrals, but because with 5 offices, you have so many internal referrals, he was always busy.
That's it.
And then the offices made money from the GP work that was done. It seemed successful. I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't seen him in a while, but at the time that I was there, I mean, it seemed like it was going, and it kind of makes sense.
Mhm.
I agree.
You know?
I 100% agree. It makes sense.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
might be something you might hear more and more about.
Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting.
You know,
Yeah.
so think about that. I honestly think that's something that is going to change. So it's either going to be either you beat them or you join them, right? And then people are like, well, general practices or general dentists are basically saying, hey, I'm going to get people to come into my office. And then other
Right.
people are like, well, why don't I just buy you out? So then it is my office. So
Yeah.
I don't need
Right.
to be standalone specialty office. I can just travel around because I'm doing that anyway. So if I do that with 5 of my offices, I get best of both worlds.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
think about it, guys. Let's gather back again and let's see how we did.
right.
What 2023 brings. All right, guys. Hey, I know it's late. Thank you guys for coming out so last minute. I definitely appreciate it. And I'll get my internet resolved. It's my
Yes.
fault. It's my fault.
Yes.
But
Well, happy New Year. I've enjoyed
Yes.
interacting with you guys this last year. I saw Walter in live and in person, and that was great. So
Yes.
I'm hoping I get to see Kyle in person one of these days. We should have a group. We should try and get on as podcast hosts of one of these big conventions.
Okay.
I think that would be, because you see that all the time. They have like this local podcast that broadcasts from the Pacific Northwest Dental
Okay.
Yeah.
Convention or whatever. So let's try and make that happen over the next year.
Then
or two.
we just
That'd be
need to
awesome.
find one that we can all go to then.
Right.
Right. We'll just find one that we can all go to, and then we'll call it a business expense.
There you go.
Sounds good to me.
All
And
right, guys.
Kyle will bring his gun. So we'll be
Yeah, oh
safe.
God. Oh Jesus. All right. We'll go down south then. Come to
Yeah.
Texas. They'll accept anybody. All right, guys. Take
All
care.
right.
man.
Happy New
All
Year,
right,
guys.
Happy New Year, guys.
Happy
Be
New
safe.
Year.
Bye.